Hey, Hungarian Nerd here with Cloud Ruler Temple. Here are 5 things that you need to know if you want to become a cloud administrator or a cloud engineer or anything to do with DevOps or system engineering, working with the cloud. The first thing you need to know is availability zones and regions. The first thing you need to know is the difference between an availability zone and a region. So what that means is there's multiple availability zones within a region. See, regions are different parts of the world. We got North America, and even in North America, we got different regions. We have, we have the West, we have the East, the Northwest, we have Europe, we have some parts of Asia now that are integrated with the cloud, and other parts of the world. So these are regions. Now within these regions, we have availability zones. So one region can have multiple data centers, and that's what an availability zone is. It's just a data center. And this is important because different regions offer different services. Some are more limited. For example, Australia only offers 2 fault domains, whereas US, you can have up to 3 fault domains. And that brings us to something like geo-redundant storage. This is storage that replicates to other geographical regions. This means that, say you're hosting a data center in the Washington, D.C. area. If something were to happen there, maybe a power outage, or maybe even a disaster like an earthquake or anything, any hectic thing that can happen, and that data center goes down for whatever reason, all of your data is already replicated to another one. So it's okay, there's still a few other ones that you have information on. And then geo-redundant storage, that's something where it even replicates to other regions. Let's say for whatever reason, North America just disappears and explodes, and all of your data is there. And it's like your data is more important than North America anyways, so all of that is already transferred over to Europe, so you can do that too. So all of your data is already saved. So pretty much guarantees a 99.99% that your data will always be there. And the only possibility that it won't is that the whole world explodes. There's another word that I put in there, which leads us to number 2. The second thing that you need to know as a cloud engineer are fault domains. What's a fault domain? A fault domain is a backup for a common source of failure. Fault domains can be created for availability sets. It can be redundant storage, network, power, memory, CPU. If you had 3 fault domains, one could be network, one could be power, one could be CPU. This means, if you're running a server in one availability zone and the CPU goes down, or the CPU is being overloaded, it can fail over to another fault domain, which can be either in the same availability zone or a different availability zone. And as I said, the region is important because Australia only has 2, whereas US has 3. And real quick, before we go to point number 4, I'm going to put in a 3.5, which is update domains. This is the bonus little nugget, 3.5. And an update domain is a logical grouping which can be restarted for platform updates. You can have up to 20 update domains at a time. The 4th term that you need to know as a cloud admin or a cloud engineer is availability set, and this ties into fault domains. So let's go over it. Availability set. An availability set is multiple servers, probably virtual, all serving the same purpose for redundancy. These are all fault domains, and availability set could be multiple DNS servers, a primary and a secondary. You can have a primary backup server and a secondary backup server, a primary gateway and a secondary gateway. If you guys are into networking, which I know some of you are, there's a term called HSRP. HSRP is when you have 2 routers, but they're virtually grouped as one. So that means client computers that are pinging each other from one network to another going through these routers, they only see one router. So if one router goes down, nothing changes because it's going to be a hot standby router, meaning that when this router goes down, it automatically going to be routed through the other router, so there's no problem. So let's go into a scenario about availability set. Say you have 3 update domains. So we have 3 update domains, and then we have 2 fault domains. Okay, so 3 update domains, 2 fault domains, and these are all in an availability set. So availability set. So our availability set, okay, we have 3 update domains, 2 fault domains, and 5 virtual machines, 5 VMs. And the reason I want you to picture these numbers is because this is important for Azure exams. So pay attention. When we have 3 update domains, Azure names them as, the first one is update domain 0, the second one is update domain 1, the third one is update domain 2. So even though we have 3 update domains, our highest number is 2 because it's starting with 0. But VMs, on the other hand, start with VM1. So, we have VM1. Oh, and fault domains are the same way. So FD 0, we have FD fault domain 1. And it stops right there, right? Because we only have 2 fault domains in this scenario, because we're in Australia. So we got VM1, it can connect to update domain 0 and fault domain 0. We have VM2 that can connect to update domain 1 and fault domain 1. Then if we have VM3, then VM3 would connect to update VM3 would connect to update domain 2, but then fault domain 0. VM4 would connect to update domain 1, or 0 I mean, and then fault domain 1. And then VM5 would connect to update domain 1, and then fault domain 0. So it's kind of like this weird algorithm where it goes back and forth like that. So that's something to remember, something to practice, and I kind of glazed over that pretty fast, but maybe in a different video we'll go into that more in depth if you guys would like. Now our 5th and final point is managed disks. This is something you really need to know as a Azure administrator. If you're experienced in IT, you might have heard a term called RAID. Redundant array of independent disks. So RAID is like a fault-tolerant, redundant storage kind of network, whereas managed disks is kind of the Azure, the cloud version of that. When you're using managed disks, Microsoft will ensure that the VM storage that is used is also distributed across update domains and fault domains, because it doesn't help us if our virtual machine compute stays online, but our storage goes down. So that will be an outage either way. And that's why we're using managed disks to create that kind of redundancy for virtual machines and for resources. Another point to remember about managed disks is that managed disks are block level storage volumes that are managed in Azure. They're used with Azure virtual machines. They are highly durable and available. They provide a high level of availability by providing you with 3 replicas of your data. If 1 or even 2 of those replicas are experiencing issues, the remaining replicas take over and keep your data persistent and available. And that's why it's like RAID, the redundant array of independent disks. And you know what? I lied. I'm having a lot of fun here, so I'm going to throw in a bonus one. 6th thing that you need to know as a cloud engineer. And that is an acronym, VMSS, Virtual Machine Scale Set. Let's say you host a solution called Jenkins, and as a solution architect, you need to find out what your solution is, what the front end is, and what the back end is going to be responsible for. This solution must scale based on demand. As you know, in old world infrastructures, it was set up for max user capacity, but now we set it up for minimum and put in the scalability for a solution to scale up automatically depending on the incoming traffic. And the scalabilities can spin up new instances of VMs that are replicated copies of the original VM. Now, we can set up manual scaling, but the magic is in the custom auto-scale definitions. When and why auto-scale will occur, and what the definition of the scaling means. Does it add CPU, or more VMs, or more of what? And how will it determine how to scale it back and to shrink it back using auto-scaling policies? And by default, VMs balance across availability zones, then fault domains. and VMs with the highest ID will be deleted first. That's something to remember. When scaling down, the VMs with the highest ID will be deleted first. And now different days of the week and different time frames can also have a minimum and a maximum scaling limits as well. So that's something to keep in mind. And now, I hope that you found something valuable in these videos, and I'd like to thank you guys for watching.